Okay, so welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. Today is a wonderful day because we're here and we're able to hear the Dharma. What a fortunate circumstance that we've arrived at on a Sunday morning. And we're able to hear the Dharma that's been passed down through a very pure lineage and kind of landed on our laps because of wonderful karma that we've had to meet with Khyentse Geshe Wandak, and to meet with all the wonderful teachers that are alive today and were previously alive that we may have met with or our teachers met with that influenced, everything that we know. So actually today, when we give the Lam Rim teaching, we're going to talk a little bit about, because we're going to start at the beginning as Buddha's Center, and using the outline of Lama Tsongkhapa's Lam Rim that you find in the Sumbun and Lama Tsongkhapa's collected works. So it's very exciting that we have the opportunity to look at this text once again from the beginning and start to understand how it relates to our practice, how it relates to basically everything that we do in our lives right from the very beginning. So I think it'll be an interesting kind of accelerated look at the Lam Rim through the eyes of Lama Tsongkhapa's actual outline that he made himself. It's called the instructions, how to instruct the stages of the path to enlightenment in an outline. So that's the actual text that I'll be using to go through these teachings on Sunday. But before we get started with any more discussion about that, I think it's important that we set our motivations, try to get into that 7-point Byroccana posture we've talked about many times. If you're not familiar with it, you can find that posture in many of the Lam Rim texts. Sometimes it's called the 8-point Byroccana posture. So we get into that posture with our legs crossed, our hands folded with right on left with thumbs touching, with our back straight like a stack of coins and our shoulders in a comfortable position where we can have our arms kind of bowed out. And then we slightly tilt our head forward in a comfortable way, not tilting it way forward, just making sure it's not back, just slightly forward. And then we have our eyes slightly open, touching at our nose, and focus on that if we can. We don't want our eyes too open because that brings upon excitement. We don't want our eyes closed because that reminds us of sleep and that can bring upon dullness. So if we stay in that very kind of middle place where our eyes are slightly open, it will help us to ward off those obstacles to mental quiescence, to calm abiding, excitement and dullness. So it's for that reason that we start to set the patterns in place for us to be able to have those mental realizations that can be aided by some of our physical postures and physical activities. So we have our eyes slightly open, pointed at the nose, and then we have our mouths in a comfortable position with the tongue against the back of the teeth. And then breathing in and out of our nose would make the 8th point of the posture, if we call it 8. So let's breathe in and out a few times for a minute or so and focus on the breath. Focus on the breath how we've been instructed. We have beings of varying capacities, students of varying capacities and scopes, beginners and very advanced practitioners. So however you've been instructed to meditate on the breath, please do so. The very basic instruction is that we imagine the breath going through our right and left nostrils. And we can imagine it in a form if you would like. We can definitely have a feeling that goes through our nostrils as we inhale, and bring the breath all the way to the top and fill up our diaphragm, fill up our lungs in their entirety. And then exhale. And as we exhale, imagine that we count the number 1. And all we're focusing on is the breath itself and the actual counting of the breath. So we're trying to bring our minds to a much more realistic place where we can then practice Dharma, and then we can then set a really proper motivation. We can kind of have an ease of direction when it comes to pointing our mind it will become a lot more easy. We'll have a lot more ease in terms of mental direction if we can bring it to a much more realistic place. Sometimes I've heard Venerable Children talk about bringing the breath home, bringing it home. So if we could just focus on the breath, breathing in, filling our lungs and breathing out for a minute or so. And then once we get to a more stable, neutral place, which isn't as distracted with the daily events or last week's events or what next week's events will be, we can try to get into the moment. We can try to get into the space, which is now. And right now, we're practicing Dharma for the sake of all sentient beings. So when we get to that more realistic space in a minute or so, we'll set a motivation and then we begin with the Heart Sutra. Now we should adjust our motivation. Ask ourselves, why are we here? Why are we attending this Dharma teaching today? And if we look at the highest reason, highest purpose for attending this teaching today, we'll find that it's to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. We think about the various sufferings that we have to endure. Recognize that all other sentient beings have to endure those sufferings as well. Think about the various sufferings that sentient beings have to endure, such as the war going on, all of the environmental disasters, famine, people of power preying on weaker ones, animals being used, animals being eaten because of our attachment to flesh, and not recognizing that all sentient beings are our mothers. In Buddha's sutra, he stated that this was actually a cause for samsara, was eating our mothers. We should change that mental attitude and wish to liberate our mothers, wish to bring all of our mother sentient beings to a state of Buddhahood. And it's for that reason that we're attending this teaching. Normally in life, we do things that will move us further away from the higher realms of liberation and Buddhahood. But today, let's set our motivation and know that we're doing this specific thing for the sake of all sentient beings. We're attending this teaching. We're listening to these prayers. We're reciting these prayers for the sake of all sentient beings. And as we recite these prayers, imagine that all sentient beings are reciting the prayers right alongside of us and understanding the prayers and getting the imprints of those prayers. And we shouldn't just recite them as if they were just words that have no meaning. Every day we can start to reflect on what the meaning of these prayers are. What does the Heart Sutra mean? How is it the greatest sutra, according to many scholars, in terms of getting rid of obstacles? What is the meaning of the Heart Sutra? Is it just about negation? So when we start to really, really understand what the meaning of these texts are, and we understand what the explicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom teachings is, emptiness, and the implicit meaning is the entire pathway. We have such a richer experience when we recite these prayers. So I really encourage every one of you, as you're reciting this prayer for the sake of all sentient beings, that you're also trying to, at whatever level or capacity you can, understand the meaning of these words, because they have such depth. And with that kind of motivation, as we go through the various prayers, after we recite them, and when we get out of class today, let's try to set our intentions to want to know more about these things. If we're reciting them and we feel like we don't understand them, let's set the intention to want to understand more and more and more, and be able to pick apart every word of any of these prayers that we read and know their intended meaning. So why are we doing that? We're doing it for the sake of all sentient beings in order to become a Buddha. And the only way we can become a Buddha is by learning, by achieving the wisdom arisen from hearing, reflection, and then meditation. And it has to go in that order. And we have to hear this material correctly. So may we aspire to become Buddhas by hearing this information correctly, analyzing this information correctly, meditating on this information correctly, and seeing all of the instructions, seeing every word that the Buddha gave as a point of practice, as a antidote to one among the 84,000 types of afflictions that we as sentient beings have in our little potpourri mess of mind that is so deluded and ignorant. So with that intention of wanting to become a Buddha and wanting to become a Buddha for others' sake, let's recite the Heart Sutra. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity, no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate, paragate, parasangati, bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala jube ne jodamba ne ngoshe do junga yi do do jan ruba bola ma yi bu jinzi ne zongan rozo la jaze lo aga zamara da janara zamara eve azman. Aga zamara de janara zamara me de ada on gate gate paragate parasangati buddhisoa Baba Ganju Zanji Gai Demi Doji She, Lava Doji Mela Doji Shiwa Doji, Taki Baji Mata Mishu Tanji Shedding Goye So, Yirin Donja Ji Shiwa Dan, Midun Nube Jindan Jiwa Dan, Tumba Junji Mbunzon Zonjoji, Dashi Di Janden Da Dele Jo. Now we'll make an outer mandala offering a perfect universe to the teacher and the lineage of teachers all the way back to Lord Buddha as a request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Radhamanalagam Niradayami. Nanye Jananda Ye Janala Janju Badu Danyi Jazuji. Dagi Jinye Jibe Zananji Jala Benji Zanje Juba Jo Zanje Judan Zuji Janamla. Yanju Badu Danyi Jazuji Dagi Jinye Jibe Zananji Jala Benji Zanje Juba Jo Zanje Judan Zuji Janamla. Yanju Badu Danyi Jazuji Dagi Jinye Jibe Zananji Jala Benji Zanje Juba Jo. So, how wonderful. We're looking at the Lamrim Chemo again and all of the different Lamrim commentaries to go along with it to try to get a better understanding of what the stages of the path to enlightenment are really about. What why were they presented and how exactly do they benefit us? What do they have to offer us, in 2022, this book that was written in the 1400s, how can it affect my mind? How will this, late 1300s, early 1400s, how will this affect my mind? Something that was written so long ago. And we can see the way that we can start to appreciate this is by going through it in its full way. Lama Tsongkhapa wrote it in a very specific way in order for us to first kind of engender this faith and want to move forward with the studies because we knew it was an authentic thing to study. And Lama Tsongkhapa felt that this was all really, really necessary to authenticate what was going to be presented. So he did so in a really beautiful fashion. First by, authenticating it in terms of the teacher, And then when we look at the authentication, of course, it's Buddha Shakyamuni, but the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is the Lamrim we speak of, we call it the Lamrim, but it's Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, is really a commentary on Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. So we needn't get into a lot of stories about Atisha and so forth at this moment, or really get into that, because we'll follow strictly the actual outline, and that way we know we'll not miss anything, and that the information will be presented in the way Lama Tsongkhapa intended. So I'm really excited about starting at this place again. And I know we went over the prologue multiple times, but I think it's important to see how it relates to lineage, and what lineage means, and what this book has to offer in terms of content. And you see what it has to offer in terms of content when you see the expression of homage. You see who Lama Tsongkhapa is paying homage to, and then you find the reason for his composition written right after that. So when we look at the actual outline of the text, it says the outline and of how to teach the stages of the path to enlightenment. First, we find homage to Manjushri, and then it literally the outline skips to the four categories that you find a little bit further in, but I'll kind of explain that as we go. So the prologue has an expression of homage to various beings. So we can go through those beings, in a general way, who each of those beings are. And I encourage all of you to read the stories of these great beings that are mentioned and fully understand who they are, because it really is an inspiring way to look at Buddhism too, is through the kind of histories, the biographies of some of these great beings, and seeing what they were willing to do for the sake of all sentient beings. And it can kind of inspire us to want to do the same. And then when we see these great beings, we know that we're in that lineage with them. When we hear all these wonderful names, we know that if we were to keep going in an expression of homage, from Lama Tsongkhapa to Lama Tsongkhapa's student to their student to their student, we would end up at Khyentse Geshe Wandak. We would end up at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We would end up in an unbroken lineage at those beings. And then where does it end up from there? It ends up in our lap, as I said before. These wonderful, beautiful, pure instructions end up in our lap. But it's really important to understand the lineage behind it, so we feel the weight of what has landed in our lap. We really understand what we have, what we have in our lap, and what it can do for us. As I said, right now in 2022, as opposed to all that time ago. It seems so long ago, in a different world, it seems like, when we read some of these things. How does it relate to us? So the prologue begins when we go right to the beginning of the Lamrim Chemo, homage to Guru Manjushri. And that's really all it says in this outline, homage to Manju Gosha. So the reasoning for this is Lama Tsongkhapa had a teacher-student relationship with Manjushri, as we've gone over many times. And it's for this reason he pays homage to Manjushri first. And if we look at when we pay reverence to the Lama or the Guru, we can see how the Guru encompasses all three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Guru is an emanation body. So, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Guru holds the Dharma of the cessation of suffering, right, within the continuum, and the true paths. And the Guru is Sangha. The Guru is seeing emptiness directly. So when we say homage to Manjushri, we can say that Guru that Lama Tsongkhapa is paying homage to, which he had a teacher-student relationship with, also encompasses all of the refuges. So just one point that we can make. I bow my head to the chief of the Shakyas, whose body was formed by 10 million perfect virtues, whose speech fulfills the hopes of limitless beings, whose mind sees precisely all objects of knowledge. So here, this is homage to Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni achieved complete enlightenment, meaning that Buddha Shakyamuni got rid of all of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And once a being does that in kind of a complicated process of pathways, he or she becomes omniscient. And it says, whose mind sees precisely all objects of knowledge. So here, Buddha Shakyamuni, who's the teacher of our time, whose texts we read in the Conqueror, the pronouncements. When we say the Conqueror, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, these are the pronouncements or the speech, what the Buddha taught right out of his mouth, or blessed to be taught. What the Buddha taught. So all basically is the Conqueror, and this was taught by a being who is omniscient. So this is Buddha Shakyamuni. And how did Buddha Shakyamuni become omniscient? By performing 10 million perfect virtues, right? For the sake of sentient beings. So in this little tiny homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, you see so much richness here that, the Buddha had to, form all of these, 10 million virtues to form this body that he has, and that the speech, fulfills the hopes of limitless beings, and the mind sees things precisely as they are. So Buddha is doing everything for the sake of all sentient beings and is omniscient. And when we look at the qualities of the Buddha's mind, we see it's that the Buddha has two qualities: love and compassion, concern for others. And then the second quality is being omniscient. So really, really has a super ability to help others. Then it says, I bow down to Maitreya and Manjushri, the supreme heirs of the unequaled teacher, the Buddha, having assumed the burden of all the conqueror's deeds. They emanate in innumerable Buddha realms. So here, bowing down to Maitreya, this is where we see the extensive deeds lineage formed. You can study into that. We can go over that at a later time. And then Manjushri, we see the profound view lineage being formed. So these are the two lineages that begin to be set up. And then I bow down to the feet of Nagarjuna and Asanga, thoroughly renowned through the three levels, ornaments of Jambuvibha, who wrote exact commentaries on the intent of the mother of the conquerors, so difficult to fathom. So here, Lord Asanga and Master Nagarjuna. Lord Asanga in the lineage of Maitreya, the extensive deeds lineage, and Nagarjuna in the profound view lineage of Manjushri, commented on the mother of the conquerors, difficult to fathom, the perfection of wisdom, what the Buddha brought forth as of the perfection of wisdom. So the mother of the conquerors here is speaking of the perfection of wisdom sutras. I bow to Dipankara Atisha, bearer treasury of the instructions that comprise the key points, unmistaken and complete of the paths of the profound view and vast deeds, transmitted well from those two great trailblazers. So here it is, the profound view, vast deeds, it's translated here as extensive deeds. Profound view lineage being that of Nagarjuna, extensive deeds or vast deeds lineage being that of Asanga, and then going up from, Nagarjuna to Manjushri and Asanga to Lord Maitreya. And you can see all of the tenets and, the different views that they held and so forth when we go into more detail about those trailblazers. But what was really special about Lord Atisha is that, and we're going to get into Lord Atisha later, is that he was able to, take both of the pathways that were transmitted, both of those vast and profound view lineages, and make it into one kind of succinct path, because the extensive deeds lineage really had a wealth of information about the stages of the path. And that wealth of information about the stage of the path was much more thoroughly presented than that of profound view, but that lineage held, in terms of presentation, the lesser view of emptiness in the Mahayana school of the mind-only school. The profound view lineage didn't focus as much on pathways, but held the final view of the Madhyamika view of understanding. So Atisha was able to take these two kind of sets of teachings and make it into one kind of succinct path and pass it to Drone Tome and then pass it to the Kadampa masters. I bow with respect to the teachers who with deeds of skill and means moved by loving concern, illuminate for the fortunate the gateway leading to liberation, the eye for viewing all limitless scriptures. Nowadays, those making effort at yoga have studied few of the classic texts, while those who have studied much are not skilled in their key points of practice. So during this time, Lama Tsongkhapa saw a delta between practice and learning. He thought that, there were people who were just studying and memorizing and learning it from an intellectual level at this time in history, the Dharma. And they knew a lot of stuff about the Dharma, but they didn't put it into practice. And then he said that there were other people who were saying that they were yogis that were not learned at all, who, were engaging in practices without knowing the view correctly. So they were kind of wasting their time, in a sense. So Lama Tsongkhapa is critiquing that, you shouldn't study all the time and not practice. You shouldn't practice all the time and not study. You should see it as the same thing. Practice and study are the same thing. So this is a really key point that Lama Tsongkhapa, made that started to kind of separate him from some of his, some of the people writing commentaries at that time, because he focused so much on the need for analysis of the scriptures and understanding from an analytical standpoint and getting an understanding from an inferential standpoint that one could arrive at before they could get to a place of direct valid cognition of something. So it says they tend to view the scriptures through the eyes of partisanship, unable to use reason to discriminate the scriptures. So just saying, this is my tradition, so this is right. I have lineage, so I know it's right, without actually being able to use reasoning to present why it's right. So, of course, they say that once you get to the Bodhisattva's first ground, that experience of emptiness that they have, that uninterrupted path, is something that's kind of beyond words. But what leads to it, the last mundane level of cyclic existence, is brought to you by analysis. So it's this analysis that brings you to inferential valid cognition about your object of observation, be it, in case of the Conqueror's intent, the understanding of the, how things can exist and be empty simultaneously, that object of observation, direct perception, has to be arrived at through reliance upon a sign first, intellectual analysis, and then that sign makes the practitioner have an incontrovertible understanding of the object of observation that then allows them to non-conceptually see it or directly perceive it. So it's very interesting how Lama Tsongkhapa presents this view of reasoning and study as part of the view of direct perception, as part of the stages of the path to a direct perception of clear light, or a direct perception of, eventually the Dharmakaya, eventually leading that Lama Tsongkhapa stated that the arisal of the eventual Dharmakaya would require to analyze those things up to the point of direct realization all throughout the various stages of the pathway to that kind of final goal, until direct perception was the full pathway, meaning the Buddha is always directly perceiving things and spontaneously. There was a question that came up in the Bodhicitta class about omniscience, and is the Buddha, having to be intentional about direction? And no, in the Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, you find that there's this spontaneity where there's not discursive thought, there's not conceptuality, because it's direct perception at all times. What is the Buddha direct perceiving? All phenomena. So there's this spontaneous direct perception of all phenomena that's coupled with this force of the Bodhisattva path that has left this love and compassion, that has as its object of observation sentient beings and their wish that they all become a Buddha. So the Buddha's primary motivation is to bring sentient beings to Buddhahood, and he or she is omniscient. So it's just spontaneously happening without a thought to make it happen by the Buddha, because of these imprints and because of the omniscience, because of the penetration that the Buddha has of all phenomena at all times without exception. There are probably many other interpretations, but this is one interpretation that I found that would really, really say that the Buddha isn't, directing in the sense the mind is directed, at all times, to what? All phenomena. To what? Freeing all sentient beings. And there isn't like they have to, I was thinking about it after class. It's not like the Buddha's waiting for like the bat light, right? To show up in the sky, be like, all right, Jeff's down there. He's going to need some help. The Buddha's just always, trying to work for our needs. But we just aren't always receptive to it, right? The Buddhas are always around us trying to help us. We just learned in the Bodhicitta class that the Buddha could be a maker, right? Could be a builder, could be a dog, could be a cat, or could, show up just like a Buddha did, looking like a Buddha and everything. But there's a lot more instances where the Buddha is emanating not as a Buddha. If we look at historical facts, we have this one Buddha 600 years ago that we say is our historical Buddha, that we said, I am a Buddha for sure. We make inferences and call different other beings Buddhas. We call our teachers Buddhas, but the Buddha that came and said, I'm the Buddha, and presented the 12 deeds was 2,600 years ago. So it's more likely, if the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are working for all sentient beings' needs all the time, that they're probably emanating as things, other than the actual Buddha more often than not. I mean, it would just be logical, right? If we were to use logic to understand it. So when we, think about our loss of Rinpoche, the other night we gave a talk on the bodies of the Buddha, and I have to say it was one of the most helpful things for me in dealing with my grief and loss with Rinpoche, because I started to really think about, if I believe my teacher's a Bodhisattva, Arya, or a Buddha, I believe Buddha. So we'll say from my side, because I can only speak from my side. If I believe my teacher's a Buddha, then there's these different bodies that is always abiding in this omniscience and this love and compassion for all sentient beings. I just happen to, not be an Arya Bodhisattva. So I can't experience the enjoyment body. I can't experience the Sammokaya. So Rinpoche couldn't help me like that. If I believe Rinpoche was a Buddha abiding in a Dharmakaya, Rinpoche couldn't help me like that because I'm not an Arya Bodhisattva. So I'm an ordinary being. I had some karma to be able to be interested in Buddhism. So I was able to meet with an emanation body of a teacher. But that emanation body of Rinpoche, we don't say is Rinpoche, because there's a Buddha emanating to everyone. So I can't convincingly prove that my postal worker who delivers my mail isn't an emanation of Rinpoche. I can't prove that any one of you on this screen isn't an emanation of Rinpoche, encouraging me to continue to teach. Because I can only know my own mind. I can't know others' minds. And when we look at this idea that this universe and consciousness could be as big as we're talking about it being, if we're believing it's potentially that big, and if we're believing what we saw, we saw this unhuman-like being practicing through the world with all of this clear knowledge. The Buddhas are always working for sentient beings. They don't really need a go-between, they could just emanate, they would know that the 14 or 20 of us were ready to hear some teachings and send down a Rinpoche, right? Send down, this omniscient consciousness that could also be my postal worker. Okay. Because maybe that Rinpoche knew he had to help my neighbor in some way. So he's emanating as a postal worker. And then also a dog that's, in a kill shelter that's about to be saved by someone could be emanating as that, in order for that person to give, in order to free a sentient being from fear. So when we start to think about how vast omniscience is, and how vast a being with omniscience mind is, we start to understand we're not as important as we think in terms of our attachment to them and them being here for only us, because they're here for everyone. And we're just experiencing this one form. And the particular form we were experiencing happened to be in a human body that breaks. And we happen to be in a human body that has and a human basis that has to experience everything breaking around us, right? I mean, prove it. Where's my great-great-grandmother? Where's my great-great-grandfather? You know, there's no way that these beings that we interact with, based on proof that we've been given over and over again, that they can stay. So of course, this being who showed up in a human form that had all of these different sicknesses, and according to this human form, would pass on. But if I'm only looking for that one form, I might miss the Khyentse Rinpoche that's helping me at the supermarket. So if I become attached to having to find this Yansik that is Rinpoche, it'd be beautiful if Rinpoche, we could name him and have him come back. But if we're so stuck on that and we can't see, some of our meditations, we do the all the deities, or we do the meditation as the singular form as all the deities. So if we can see that, you know, His Holiness and Rinpoche and all of these are just some emanation being pushed to us to help us be free from suffering, it makes us more open. It makes us more tuned in to more help. It makes us less attached to something that isn't even what we thought it was in the first place. It's like if this is just an emanation body, you know, it's a human that's been emanated, but it's just like a light that's been sent down that was just shut off, but the lamp is still there, right? And this lamp can shine millions and billions and billions of immeasurable lights, and they aren't just for me; they're for everyone. So when I start to see that, then I'm inspired by my teacher to work for everyone. And I stop thinking about me only. I stop cherishing myself only. And I start to think about my teacher in this broader sense, who just showed up in this one individual perspective because he loves everyone and knew that this one person needed that. And you needed that. And they needed that. And it's just so amazing when you start to look at the expanse and potential of an omniscient mind that loves everyone. And that's why you study the bodies of the Buddha, right? I'm thinking like, oh, this difficult information, how is this helpful? And then boom, an hour later, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is helpful because I can understand Rinpoche better. I can understand what an emanation body, you know, came from. You know, it spontaneously arose while and if I believe this, at the same exact time, this being is in a Pure Land teaching Arya Bodhisattvas. Because it says they arise at the same time. Like it says that from the Buddha's love and compassion and omniscience, the emanation and enjoyment bodies arise. You know, so, you know, Rinpoche was teaching me, but the Arya Bodhisattvas that were in the Pure Land were just as much connected to Rinpoche as I was. And Rinpoche, you know, was in a pure 32 major marks and 80 minor marks form if he was in the Sambhogakaya, you know, teaching beings that we can't see in a place we can't see. And it starts to loosen our grip on what we think this is and that is, and starts to kind of point our intentions towards, you know, this beginningless continuum that we have, and this endless continuum that we have, and this endless, you know, all of these opportunities within, you know, this continuum to meet with an emanation of that omniscient mind of love and compassion. So I don't ever want to stop saying Khyentse Geshe Wandak, but I think it's so important to say, who was Khyentse Geshe Wandak? Why do Buddhas appear in this world? What can Buddhas offer us? Buddhas can't take away our sin. They can't wash away our sin. They can't give us their realization. All they can do is teach us. So they're spontaneously, without even thinking, oh, there's Jeff, I need to help him. Their omniscient consciousness just knew right then and there, Jeff was ready and had the potential to hear something. And the omniscient consciousness, without having to, and the love and compassion without having to be like, oh, now it's time. Omniscience just knew at that moment, because each moment was a new, incontrovertible direct perception. It knew at that moment was time, because he directly or she directly perceived my imprints were ready to hear, if you will. And if you start to look at this being who's emanating to all these different beings and just came to me because my imprints were ready to hear, and now I can keep connecting with that being and keep connecting with that being. And now I kind of have like a name almost to connect to it, but we shouldn't grasp at that name and look at that name as permanent. We need to understand that that name may not be the name of the Buddha that he is, right? When we look at some of the biographies of Tsongkhapa and we see the previous lives, I mean, you should see who they say Tsongkhapa is. Padmasambhava, Chandrakirti. You just see so many different beings. Atisha, that Lama Tsongkhapa is said to have been an emanation of. And of course, we have to say, question it, right? There's got to be individual personalities, right? Because of the varieties of beings and varieties of, pathways. And there's, countless Buddhas that have already become. We don't always have to say it's the same one over and over again. But it's really a way to look at it, and a way to not grasp at these beings' identity as being who they were, but what they said. I think that's what it is. It's what they said, what they taught us, how they shaped our minds, what we hear when we walk through our day and we're about to do something we shouldn't, what we hear that stops us, right? When we have these habitual patterns that we usually just kind of like blah, go and do, that voice in our ear that says, no, that's not accurate, that's not real, is Rinpoche, is the truth in our ear, is the teacher in our ear, is the omniscient mind knowing that's what we needed to hear in our ear. So it's really, really helpful. I'm sorry I, kind of got sidetracked here, but it really was so helpful to be able to think in these ways and see how analyzing these scriptures and looking at this stuff and understanding it very well. I've studied the bodies of the Buddha for 25 years, but the other day I'm telling you all the stuff I know about it, and I learn it, right? So there's interdependence here, and that's why teaching the Dharma is so profound, or talking about the Dharma is so profound, because you hear yourself start talking about it, and then you realize what someone might ask as a question, and then you start to say, this has got to be thorough, because, and then you start to debate your own mind. Is this thorough? And it's really beautiful. And that happened after that teaching, and it wasn't like I had a realization. I never want, when I say that I learned something new, it's not like, and then, the whole merit field appeared. No, nothing like that happened whatsoever. I just felt a little less sad and had a new way and a new tool to cope with this grasping that I still have, and this missing at this, body that was around, me walking around and interacting with me all these years, and I have this big attachment to this personality who knew nothing really about me except everything that I needed. He knew, if I believe he's omniscient, he knew everything about me, but we sure didn't talk about that much of it. But we talked about what was an antidote to my mess a lot. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I can see now, by studying the bodies of the Buddha more intensely, how it was really just catered directly to what I needed. And that's what the teachers are doing. They're catering it, these real high teachers. I'm just giving overviews. I don't have clairvoyance. I have, a skill maybe in presentation. I have had amazing teachers over the years and will continue to have amazing teachers, but I don't have the clairvoyance. I don't know exactly what you all need. I know that Rinpoche talked to all of you. I believe he had it. I know what he talked to all of you about, so I'm going to talk to you about the same thing. So I'm just winging it, guessing that Rinpoche, because he, I believe, was a Buddha, talked to you about this stuff. So I think it's appropriate for me to do so as well. But you know, it's really, really just so profound to be able to start to see these teachings. Like, you know, we talked about it before, the shower moments, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, right? Or when Terry's playing his guitar, right? And he's able to like get out of his head and like be like, oh, that's what the meaning of emptiness is. Or even when you look in some of the texts, I think the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, right? The Lojong text, if I'm wrong, I apologize, where it goes through the musical instruments and dependent origination and how like you can really realize things in very strange ways. But that doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't some new awareness that popped out of the sky. It's something that we studied a little before previously that now a veil's been lifted on, you know, maybe in a previous life, or something we're studying now that we just think about when you read, you know, 20 books, how many of the words just are somewhere else? You read them, but they're in there somewhere, right? So when you read a text on Madhyamaka, you may not, like you get done with it and you're like, I have no idea what I just read. But it's in there, right? It's in there. You looked at it, your mind, your eye consciousness looked at the words, you know, and then, you know, sent like the signal through your eye conscious, your eye sense power powered this process. Okay, so let's look at how this whole thing took place, right? The previous moment there was a book, you know, words to read, you know, your eye sense power then powers up an eye consciousness to apprehend it. And then your mind, you know, names it, you know, and that's the process, you know, that is going on as we, you know, look at these words, you know, so as we're doing that, it's at least landing at the mental consciousness level if it's being transmitted, right? This is my theory right now. So, you know, I love debate though. So, but you know, if you're bringing it in, you're seeing it, you know, you're focused on it, you know, even if you're not able to rip the words apart, you're naming it as Madhyamaka words, but it's somewhere in there as an imprint. You've sucked it in, your eye sense power to consciousness to suck this information in and put it in a place to be able to be named by your mind, right? So you have a physical eye consciousness that's apprehending these words in a preceding moment where the words were there. You know, this eye sense power that's firing up your eye consciousness. These are all physical things that are pulling the words in, you know, knowing maybe they're words, but not naming them words, not, you know, having the details of them at all. And then your mental consciousness names them and starts to be able to understand those words. So it's landing in there is my point. There is a landing strip for this information. So when we start to have these moments of understanding, it is not out of nowhere. We don't chop wood and just suddenly understand emptiness. It's because we've learned about the process of dependent origination previously. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this is a collection of parts, you know, and it isn't inherently one log. Now, is it two logs? Which part of this, you know, log I cut was log I named, you know? That came from the analysis of dependent origination. So you can see how important analysis is and can be. And I'm just relating experience that I just had that, you know, what could be the most important thing, you know, on my mind and present in my mind 90 days after my root Lama passes away, that. And if there's something that analysis can provide, if analysis can provide an antidote to something that powerful, you know, that like guttural, you know, at times, like we're like, oh my gosh, like almost you want to throw up, you get so sad, right? Everyone's experienced that level of sadness. It was more in the beginning, but if there's an antidote that analysis can bring on for something that just in your face, it really brings me hope. You know, it really brings me hope that this stuff works and that this, you know, gives me some relatability to the world that's more realistic because I'm looking at it with wisdom instead of ignorance. So they tend to view the scriptures through the eyes of partisanship, that this is my dharma. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know why. It's my lineage and they just say so. I'm unable to use reason to discriminate the meaning of the scriptures. Therefore, having seen that they lack the path pleasing to the wise, the supreme complete instructions, the key points of the teaching, I was inspired to explain the path of the great trailblazers. All those fortunate ones who are obscured by the darkness, who have the mental capacity to differentiate good and bad, and who wish to make meaningful this good life of leisure, should listen with one pointed attention. And then Lama Tsongkhapa says here what he's going to do. He says, I'm going to explain this for fortunate, how fortunate beings are led to Buddhahood through stages. First of all, it's going to contain everything that the Buddha taught. So it's going to contain, everything, all the key points of what the Buddha taught. This is Lama Tsongkhapa's promise to compose. He's promising us. He's saying it's going to contain everything, all the key points of what the Buddha taught, and it's going to be based on the two trailblazers, based on the commentaries of Asanga and Nagarjuna, right? The profound and extensive deeds lineage. And it's going to be a system for supreme beings who want to progress to omniscience. It's going to be a system. It's going to be systematic. It's going to be like, hey, do you want to be omniscient? Here's what you do. There's not going to be anything left out. It'll be a system. It's going to be very clearly presented, and the end result will be omniscience. That's kind of his promise. Like, I'm going to show you how to become omniscient. Are you listening yet? And it'll fully comprise all of the stages of the path for beings of three capacities. And then Lama Tsongkhapa has to make a choice. Does he want to do this explanation according to a Nalanda tradition, where they explain it in one way, or the Vikramoshila tradition, where they explain it another way? We find Atisha's connection to Vikramoshila monastery. So I don't know if that's the reason why Lama Tsongkhapa chose to explain it in the following way I'm about to say, but the way that they explain things at Vikramoshila were in the following way. So now we move back to finally the outline. So the outline says the teaching on the stages of the path to enlightenment is divided into four. And then we go to the Lamrim Chemo, and it says the explanation of the stages of the path to enlightenment has four parts, showing the greatness of the teaching's author in order to establish that its noble origin. So the greatness of Atisha is that we show, but of course, the ultimate author of the Lamrim is Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, showing the greatness of the teaching in order to engender respect for the instructions, how to listen to and explain the teaching, and how to lead students through the actual instructions. So then the outline that's in the Lamrim Chemo that you'll find is a lot more and has a lot more points to it. But we'll just look at the one that I have in front of me because this is what we're going to use to teach from. So it says then when we divide these, there's four categories. And then the first category, the greatness of the teaching's author, in order to engender, establish that it's from noble origin, has three categories. First, how Atisha took birth in an excellent lineage. So it shows how Atisha was, had an excellent background, excellent upbringing. He was a prince. He could have anything that he wanted, but it left him wanting. And he kept sneaking out, Lord Atisha, to go find gurus, sneaking out of the palace and making up like, I'm going hiking, Dad. And he would sneak out of the palace to go find gurus. So it shows in this part, I'm getting into the next part, but it shows how he was born of this excellent lineage. He could have anything that he wanted. He was very, very well educated. He was very, very smart right from, the beginning of his life. He just started showing signs of basically genius. And then how he gained his excellent qualities. So then this category is how he gained the excellent qualities of scriptural knowledge. So it'll show how Lord Atisha just studied with so many different teachers and studied so many different texts and was willing to do, anything that he had to do in order to learn more and more of the Dharma. He had, he was never satisfied with instructions that were kind of partial. He, like Lama Tsongkhapa, was just always, searching for more and more and more explanations, having hundreds, over 100 gurus and so forth. So Atisha gained these excellent qualities of scriptural knowledge by studying with teachers. And it's so obvious why the Lamrim starts with the teacher, right? You have to find a teacher to learn. It's, it's not some guru worship thing. It's like, if you want to learn English, you probably need to find an English teacher. You want to learn Buddhism, you probably need to find a Buddhism teacher. You want to learn everything there is to know and has ever been known about Buddhism and all the facets, you probably need to either find, the highest, most genius teacher, or a lot of different teachers who can get you to that place of full understanding and full information. So he went around and learned from everybody. And then it shows how he gained his realizations, of, his highest higher training in ethics, highest higher training in concentration, and highest higher training in wisdom. And then it shows this highest higher training in ethics, how Atisha took the individual liberation vows and the vows of a fully ordained monk, and took the bodhisattva vows and took the tantric vows and really, really guarded those vows, guarded his ethics like his eyes, and showed others how if you want to practice Tantrayana, you have to be a very ethical person. You have to engage in ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. The highest thing you could do is become a fully ordained person and carry those pure vows of celibacy and so forth. And these bodhisattva vows were necessary because in order to practice Tantra, you had to do it for love and compassion reasons. You had to do it for all sentient beings. You had to engage in behaviors that were in alignment with that, and modes of thinking that were in alignment with wanting to do things for all sentient beings. And become Buddha for all sentient beings in order to practice Tantrayana properly. And you had to keep those Tantrayana vows purely. And in them, they talk about keeping the other moralities purely. So Atisha just saw that the grounding in ethics was that foundation that would allow one to become omniscient, and Nagarjuna speaks of it as being the foundation, the fertile ground from which everything can grow, is that ethical behavior. And Atisha really saw that and took those vows. And then how he gained his realization of concentration, the highest higher training in concentration. It was common and uncommon concentrations, and the highest higher training in wisdom, and those common and uncommon wisdoms that he trained in. So we find Atisha just being so amazing. And I encourage everyone to study the life story more and learn about what Atisha did and what all of those things will mean. I don't want to get too much into the highest higher trainings and so forth, because we'll get into them later in the Lamrim Chemo. But just know that Atisha trained and practiced and meditated on these things for a very long period of time and didn't stop and never stopped right till the end of his life. And once he had those, then the third category in the text is once he had those good qualities, what he did with them, what he did in India, and then what he did in Tibet. And in India, he debated and really cleaned up a lot of wrong views, and was able to compose texts. And then in Tibet, we know he came to Tibet at the request of an uncle who gave his life, and a nephew who carried out his uncle's wishes for the Dharma, Shanchuo and Yeshewo. So we see the purity of intention that all of this Dharma we're studying comes into being. Someone gives their life because they know it's so important. And then someone lets their relative give their life because they know it's so important. And then Atisha brings this beautiful Dharma to Tibet and clarifies things in a similar way that Rinpoche did in the United States, right? He just brought this laser of clarity, this lamp that illuminated the pathways so clearly in this muddled water of confusion, right? In Tibet at the time. And when I think about Rinpoche in the West at the time, when I started studying, there was just so much. And now there's even more with YouTube, but just so much. If you didn't know anything about Buddhism, you could just land on and just be so confused. And Rinpoche was just like a laser that came in and brought that pure lineage of Dharma and was able to present it like Atisha did to Tibet to us in the West. And I feel so blessed. I don't feel like I'm anywhere like the realization like Drone Tompa, but I hear the story of Atisha and Drone Tompa, and knowing Atisha transmitted the lineage to a layperson named Drone Tompa. And I think like, I'm not a bodhisattva, but I want to be one. I'm not Drone Tompa, but I want to be one. Rinpoche, like, it was an emanation of a Buddha, could have been Atisha. I don't know. I'm that's above my pay grade, but it's just so inspiring to know, right? That these things are just possible for all of us. These aren't about people, other people. These things are about us. It's about our own personal practice and our own evolution and potential to become better than we are now. It's not about anything else. It's about becoming better every single day. What does better mean? Less ignorant and more compassionate, more cherishing of others' needs than our own, and understanding emptiness, right? Which is the opponent to ignorance, is what really makes us understand why we doesn't even make sense to cherish ourselves more than others. When we think of dependent origination and we think of our emptiness is the same emptiness as theirs, and so forth. And when we start to look at dependent origination and beginningless time, it starts to really, really become bigger and bigger to us. And it's really wonderful that it can do that. And so that's basically what, those categories, the greatness of the author in order to show that it's from noble origin. And the last thing I want to go over, and I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I just want to go over it slightly, is the next category, because I just find this next category to be so wonderful. And it really shows you what's landed in your lap. It shows you what you have right now. So it's the greatness of the teaching in order to make you respect it, basically. If we look at the translation, in order to engender respect, in order for you to really, really, and it's more than just respect, it's almost just revere. I'm showing you the greatness of this teaching so you revere it. So there are 4 categories. The greatness of the teaching and enabling one to know that all of the teachings are free of contradiction. So when Atisha came to Tibet, and other times, and maybe even now, right? There are practitioners who believe that the sutra and tantra teachings are incompatible, and that an analysis isn't, part of the process to direct perception and towards omniscience. It could be a hindrance to it. So what Atisha was able to do is show how every teaching was presented in order for a sentient being to be able to become a Buddha. Like individual, we all like things that are catered to us. Well, that's all the Buddha does. Just caters to us, caters to our exact needs. So Atisha allowed us to understand that, to see that the Buddha gave 84,000 kind of antidotes to 84,000 afflictions and problems that we have. And we don't all have the exact ones manifesting as strongly at one time as others. And maybe we've done a better job on others than we have on some since our beginningless lives. And, some are grosser and higher value than others. But the Buddha knew that each being was so different. And everybody had so many varieties of experiences because of the varieties of karma that it was going to really need to be a system that was specialized, a specialized system for the individual practitioner. So Lord Atisha allowed us to see that all of these teachings were not contradictory, and we either direct pathways or byways to the final goal of Buddhahood. So we can get into some of the ideas, at the time that we're going on. The greatness of enabling one to understand that all the scriptures are instructions to practice. Just like I was talking about before, Atisha, passed down to Drone Tompa, to the Kadampa masters, eventually to Rinpoche, to us, allowed us to understand that study, practice, all these things are the same. Our post-meditation period is practice. Our studying is practice. It's all one thing that's heading towards the goal of omniscience. So Rinpoche was able to show us that so clearly, that everything is just an instruction to practice, that Buddha didn't point things out for no reason. He was giving these advices and telling us these things so that we could put them into practice, so that we weren't just reciting words, right? Just reciting the Heart Sutra without knowing, implicit and explicit meanings. not putting it into practice, thinking that we just meditate and that's the practice. And when we come out of meditation, then we're not practicing anymore. What would we be, meditating for if it wasn't to, practice what we've meditated upon to see how good we're doing at what we're trying to become better at? So Atisha really showed us how it would enable us, and the greatness of enabling one to easily understand the conqueror's intent. This is something I found neat, and this is what I wanted to get to. So what was the conqueror's intent? What did the Buddha intend for us to know? So when we look at Lama Tsongkhapa's three principles paths, we see right at the beginning, it talks about this. It talks about the conqueror's intent, and it talks about it being renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. So, what does that mean? The conqueror, the scriptures easily understand their intent. So Pabunka Rinpoche gives this really beautiful explanation of what this means. So if you were to take the ocean, right, and consider that the Kangjur and Tanjur, right, all of the pronouncements of Lord Buddha and all of the authentic Indian commentaries, right, and floating in that ocean that hasn't been all like cleaned up, it's a big ocean, all of the stages are written for people with very sharp capacities at this point. So in this big ocean, you have renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness floating around in there. In Kangjur and Tanjur, you have this renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness floating around in this ocean. Pabunka says the stages of the path to enlightenment are like this boat that's going to get you in this ocean over to renunciation, and then you'll be able to realize, bodhicitta and emptiness. It's like the stages of the path are this boat that knows how to get to the places in that ocean you need to get to. And what was the conqueror's intent? For us to get renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And then eventually, according to the three principal paths, it's to be able to understand how things exist and are empty at the same time. It says that, if you don't know that in the three principal paths, Lama Tsongkhapa says, if you haven't figured out how the conventional and the ultimate simultaneously work, how you can posit existence and emptiness simultaneously, then you haven't landed on the conqueror's intent. So the conqueror's intent is for us to realize this emptiness. And then if we look at what that has to be conjoined with in order to become a Buddha, we see it's the method part of the path in order to achieve, this bodhicitta that eventually through the bodhisattva stages in union with this emptiness allows us to get rid of the self-cherishing attitude, its imprints, and all the obstructions to omniscience and afflictive obstructions. So then there's a boat, okay? Who's driving it? The teacher. So Pabunka says the teacher's in the boat, we're a passenger, and the teacher's showing us how we take the boat of the Lamrim to each of those destinations of renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And I thought that was so beautiful when I read that. I mean, it's making like my hair stand up. Like, these big ocean of teachings the Buddha gave, the sutras and the tantras and all these authentic Indian commentaries. And we start to try to read them and we can get so lost in the meaning of them. But then if we start to lasso them up a little bit with the Lamrim teachings, we can start to get a hold of them a little bit. And then as we have a hold of them a little bit, now they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of what we're trying to look at. And then the Lama's making it smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of summary and understanding and giving us a lens to figure out. It's almost like it's not just glasses that allow us to see, it's glasses to allow us to see and see where to go next. So it's not only allowing us to see it, but it gives us this intuition glasses because the teacher is bringing us through these stages because his or her teacher brought them through those stages and their teacher brought them through those stages and their teacher brought them through those stages. And we eventually end up at Buddha Shakyamuni, We look at this beautiful lineage when you start to study it, Buddha Shakyamuni and Manjushri and Asanga and Nagarjuna and Maitreya and Dharmakirti and Vasubandhu and just all these wonderful teachers and Shantideva and Chandrakirti, just hearing these names, Baba Vega and Buddha Palita in our ears is like blessings of rain showering down on us, because these are the beings who taught truth. These are the beings who helped Lama Tsongkhapa become a Buddha. And then Lama Tsongkhapa told Kirtup and Jessup and all of his students how to become a Buddha. And they told their students. Then eventually someone told Panchen Sonandrapa how to become a Buddha. The second Dalai Lama, I believe, was Panchen Sonandrapa's teacher. And the third Dalai Lama was Panchen Sonandrapa's student. And we end up at the 14th Dalai Lama. We end up at Khensa Rinpoche. We end up with this unbroken lineage of teachings that show us as a passenger how to get through this huge ocean that's so dark and doesn't make any sense sometimes, to the realizations that we're going to need to become Buddhas. And wow, right? That's like, when you look at what we've landed in our lap like that, that's mind-blowing. And when we look at how it landed in our lap by studying bodies of Buddha and understanding it may have just come from omniscient mind that loved everyone, that came to us, we know we were taught from omniscience. So we know we got exactly the prescription we were supposed to get. And that's the cool part too. If we believe Buddha, Rinpoche was omniscience, he presented these stages of the path to enlightenment to us from an all-knowing place. So that means that he or she, neither really, knew that we were receptacles. We were, vessels for that. So it should give us courage to move forward, because an omniscient being thinks we were vessels. That should give you courage. Rinpoche wasn't teaching to 1,000 of us. He was teaching to the folks on this screen, weekly. I understand Rinpoche had a lot of students. Rinpoche had students in Tibet when he was a little kid because he was smarter than everybody else there too. But I mean, the ones that we've been watching, and we've been with Rinpoche weekly and hearing him teach, and, he had faith in us. He knew that we could handle that material. He came to this small group of us, taught us every single week over and over and over again, because he knew we were vessels. And from a lineage perspective, he said to me the last day he spoke to me, please carry these teachings on. So it gives me like a little hope, even though I know I'm a bug compared to Rinpoche. And I am not intoxicated with this idea of, oh, I know something now. I know what Rinpoche taught, and I know what he taught to you all. So I would just like to put, that in a language, that maybe is a more of a contemporary language that means exactly the same thing, because Rinpoche's teacher spoke to him in his language and his contemporary frames of reference. Khensa Pema Jetsun and Dzong Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche and Trijung Rinpoche, they left Tibet in 59, and before that they were used to people behind yaks and plows and a frame of reference without a modern society and without having to do all these things, and almost a class structure. They all depended upon religion's hierarchy. That was their frame of reference. So, an emanation can only be who they are, right? So I just pray that I can take some of this information, not all of it, because Rinpoche gave me information I could never digest in this life. But the digestible stuff, I hope that I can present in a way that is tangible and is almost like ornaments on this beautiful, beautiful thing that we already know. And not that I'm thinking I'm ornamenting something, but just giving it maybe a little more color or light, just because of language, not because of meaning. The meaning is already as beautiful as it can get, but maybe the language can be easier to be heard, right? For, dodos like me, and with references of like stuff that I have reference to. So anyway, yeah, and Rinpoche emanated based on this structure I just set up, a thesis, many, many different ways to many, many different people. So I wouldn't even begin to think I was the only one he asked, right? So anyway, the greatness of, and then the fourth category, the greatness of enabling one to refrain automatically from the great wrongdoing. And that's where we'll end. If you study this stuff very, very well, you will not abandon the Dharma. You won't say, oh, the Hinayana is no good, or, oh, those Tantrayana people are really messed up, or Kala Chakra is not real, or Guhya Samaj is not real, or, the small scope is really, inferior, or, it really allows you to respect these teachings and understand that they're the cure for everything. Why would we talk badly about any of them if they cure everything? If all the teachings are a cure or a byway to the cure for everything, and we're not omniscient, then we need to be really careful. That doesn't mean we don't critique things that are incorrect being presented as correct. That's our tradition. But we really, really have to be careful not to abandon the Dharma and to really respect all of the different teachings that were given and understand that they were given to scope. And this is really speaking about the different tenet systems and so forth, but we can apply that across the board and understand that we really should respect all religious traditions. We don't need to mix up religions. That's something the Dalai Lama said is very important not to do, not try to, make interfaith, like inter-religion, like one religion almost, because then that, he says, we don't want to make tupa, which is Tibetan soup, out of religion. Like Tibetan tupa has like whatever you put in it, a bunch of stuff. It could have daikon radish, sometimes this, sometimes meat, sometimes potatoes. We don't want to make, Buddha Dharma into like soup, like Tibetan soup. But we can respect all traditions and see that, an omniscient being can emanate in many, many ways to try to present the truth and present love and compassion. And if we look at, Chandrakirti's beginning of the text, he pays homage to compassion. He bows to compassion. He says it's the seed. It's important at the beginning, the middle, and the end. All the practices of Buddhism are a cause for compassion or a result of compassion. So if we look at it like that, and we look at other religious traditions, then it becomes hard to argue that there isn't good in anything teaching compassion, and that there isn't the potential that it's just a Buddha emanating to teach compassion. So I hopefully today, a lot of ordinary appearances could be shaken up. That was the goal, right? I just want to thank all of you for listening. I know it's a bit late, but I will open it up for question and answer. And then I just want to say to all of you that the Buddha's Center, www.buddhacenter.com is up and running. It has some workability. It's, doesn't have like, everything we will want it to have, but it will eventually. It's no race to website. It does everything we need it to do now. You can click on it, get to the teachings and so forth. And there's 2 teachings a week now. Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. We'll be doing the Salam Rim discussion. And then Thursday evenings at 7:30, I'm teaching Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, and specifically the Bodhicitta section. So we'll be doing that. And all of the teachings are now being uploaded to YouTube to Buddha's Center. And there's an icon with Tara. You'll see white Tara's face there. And you'll know that's us. And we're trying to get them uploaded as quickly as possible. And everybody will have the ability then to go back and reference some of these points. And then in the future, when we start to have discussion groups, which we will have, but we have to do things in my mind in stages. And I don't want things to get out of control. And when I say out of control, I mean out of benefit control. And we had discussion groups at the Chenrezig Center back in the late 90s, early 2000, that weren't structured, right? Like someone said, they weren't structured in a way with time limits and respect. And it just turned into like, who thought they knew more about it than the other person? 2 or 3 people with the strongest personalities wanted to talk the whole time. And they weren't even the ones who knew the material that well. They just like to hear themselves talk more. And it just became a circus of not truth. And people became more confused about mind in Tibetan Buddhism, Lorig, than they were when they came into it 6 months before we started. And one of the people left the center and never came back. Because they were yelled at, because they were one of the ones that were actually really, really intelligent, kind of hogging the room, really knew the material the best, and got yelled at because someone didn't know it as well as them and their ego was wounded, and then that person never came back. So I just want to, whenever we're making decisions and doing things slowly, it's because I have a lot of Dharma experience. I have 2 decades just with our center. I've traveled the United States with Rinpoche, seen a lot of Dharma centers, read a lot about a lot of other Dharma centers. I lived in India, heard about all the Dharma centers from that perspective. So it's really important in the West that we take this slowly. Venerable Thupten Chodron has been the longest ordained nun in the one of the longest ordained nuns in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. That's a Westerner. She has gone very, very slowly at creating this monastic tradition in the West. There are 18 people there. She is the longest, it's not like there's 150 or 200 people there, because there were specific codes and there were specific structures that were set up, and it was set up in a way that there was clarity around everything that they did around mission. And even with all of that, they've had problems. They're worldly people, problem and challenges. I don't want to say problems, but we really have to be careful, because this is something so golden and so precious. And it's not about a place. It's not about, things we can accumulate or stuff. It's about this Dharma that was presented to Buddha to us. Like, look at it in a line of continuum, like just go like real fast forwarding through time of teacher, 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 teacher. And like just fast forwarding through all our experiences and connections, the Buddha's teaching us. And that's what we're holding on to. And there's only a few of us, right now in the West, that are kind of like trying to hold on to this thing that's like a slippery, like a snake or a pig covered in Vaseline, right? You're trying to get a hold of, and we're trying to keep it grounded and make it not run all over the place, and make it not be mystical and weird, and make it not be something where people are communicating with each other through minds and stuff, because that's not what the Dharma is about. The Dharma is very grounded and clear. And those who know don't tell, and those who tell don't know. And it seems in the West, we want to talk about these visions and mystical realizations. And, I talked to Tara and I saw this and I saw that. I never hear once. That's not true. Rinpoche one time told me he met a deity. End of his life. Last 6 months of his life. Only time I ever heard him say anything like that. He used to laugh at me when I talked about stuff like that. Because those who know don't tell. And he told it at the exact opportune time, because he knew I wasn't going to share it with the world. He wrote it in his book and waited until he passed, because he knew I would share it then. But people who have realizations know what they were. They aren't wondering if they were real or not, ever. Someone who realizes something knows they realized it. They don't have to question it. They don't have to go and say, hey, I think this happened or that happened. It's a clear realization, like Rinpoche going, Jeff, come downstairs. I just saw White Tara, 100%. And why do we think it's even possible? Because we knew who Rinpoche was. We knew he had studied the 5 great philosophical texts unerringly. We knew that he had the understanding of all the 4 classes of Tantra and had gone through all of the stages and memorized them and practiced them and done so many retreats his whole life in connection with those deities. So yeah, that makes sense that he would have realized that. But just the fact that I pulled up in my 76 Omega, right, and had maybe, thought I had some realizations because I had read, some 60s literature when I was in high school, that dealt with, deconstructing reality, that I was ready to realize emptiness and see Buddhas. And a lot of that, these hallucinations that happened to me early on, and I call them hallucinations, they were kind of, my mind playing tricks on me early on, were just from a place of non-virtue. And that's hard to swallow, but a lot of these things that I thought I was realizing when I did my first retreat were all just delusional attachment and ignorance, just manifesting into an experience. So anyway, enough out of me. I'm sorry I said it was going to end, and it's 11:33. But Dan, I see you have a question.
Yes, Jeff, thank you. First, I want to mention the fact that today was very inspiring. I think there was this attitude that was coming from you of really bringing some energy to your teaching today, and it was very helpful for me, and it was I appreciate it. So thank you for that. So my question was with regards to understanding the relationship in the practice to the Chitta Mantran or mind only school. And because I always had this kind of feeling like it potentially could have been useful to use the mind only school as a stepping stone, not as a final view, but as a stepping stone to understand maybe the nature of selflessness in a context that could potentially be useful because there are also teachings that arise in the Dzogchen tradition, which I had requested that Rinpoche many years ago that I could explore and try to integrate. And they teach how the nature of the mind is clear light, and the nature of all phenomena is its play, or could be described as its play. So I very much believe that the final view is the Madhyamaka, which is just realizing things lack inherent existence altogether, and that even the mind itself is empty. But I feel like it would potentially be helpful to know, first of all, what in short is the general view of the mind-only school, and if you believe it might be useful to have it be a potential, like not an end, but almost like a signpost for a deeper realization.
Okay, I'll give a very short, that's a deep question that could be an entire class, of course.
Yeah.
Could be many, many classes, but I'll give you the short of what I think in terms of that. And then let's move after that, unless there's anything really demanding or pressing, onto your motivation, maybe set some intention for the prayer,
Sure.
and then we'll do the dedication. But the short on it is as follows. All of the tenet systems contain things within them useful to negate levels of our misperception. So even the lowest school of the Vajrasattva system starts to show us how to deconstruct the selflessness of persons, and what that would look like. And many of the lower schools hold common views. So we wouldn't say just because it's a view of Vajrasattva, it's not a view of Prasangika. No, we would never say that. We also wouldn't say that it's like stages, if you will. That's not really fair to say. It could go in stages because you're getting rid of more and more subtle forms of grasping as you go through, because your objects of negation become more and more subtle as you go through. So all of the tenets are helpful. There's no question about it. And scholars would argue you really have to understand all of the tenets to really know if you understand Madhyamaka. Okay. Because to know Madhyamaka starts to negate so many things subtly.
Yes.
That you kind of have to see what the other schools are holding to.
Right.
To understand how Lama Tsongkhapa undoes it.
I see, yes.
But there aren't, Lama Tsongkhapa, I say Tsongkhapa, we're just, the Madhyamaka Prasangika view, according to Nagarjuna say it, doesn't discard all of the views of the lower systems. Okay, so that all being said, because some of them are concordant with the final view, and others allow you to have a basis of kind of analysis, something to analyze, if you will. It's tangible, something, the way that Tsongkhapa said that we learn how to deconstruct things is we start with the wrong view. Yes. And then we move to the correct view. Right. But if you don't know what the object of negation is, then how do you do that? So the great scholars say you've got to know all the tenets to know what Lama Tsongkhapa's final object of negation is, because if you don't know what the subject is. You don't have your hand on the subject. Okay. The mind-only school, skipping forward, so there are 4 tenet system. The Vibhashika, it's called the Great Exposition School. The Sautrantika Sutra School. Chittamantran, mind-only school, and Madhyamaka, middle way school.
Yes.
We would consider the two lower schools, we call them, of Great Exposition and Sautrantika Hinayana schools. That doesn't mean that no matter what, someone who practices those are Hinayanists. Vasubandhu was a Mahayanist and wrote quite a bit of information about that material. So it doesn't mean if someone penned it that's their view, right? But those are generally concerned with the views presented in the Four Noble Truths. They're considered a Hinayana view.
Yeah.
Now, the mind-only school and the middle way schools are considered the Mahayana views.
Yes.
Both of those schools negate inherent existence of all phenomena. So they both
really?
say that. Both schools.
I thought it was the case that the mind only was considering mind to be inherently existent, but everything else
don't think so. They don't think so.
Okay.
They are not correct according to Prasangika, but they don't think so.
Okay.
They say we abandon inherent existence.
Oh, really?
So they say that the inherent existence is the external phenomena.
Okay.
That the mind is projecting, right?
Right.
That there is this portion of the mind that Madhyamikas say inherently exists.
Yeah.
But the mind only would argue that.
Oh, okay.
But the mind only school believes that basically there's like an ocean that's taking place. That, like, imagine waves coming in and going out. That we're projecting out phenomena. There's no external tangible thing. It's just a projection of our mind.
Right.
But there's no thing outside, like it's a projection of our mind.
Like
and
a dream.
Based on that projection, we act and experience and create more future projections. So it's like this circle of a mind projecting, and then the mind experiencing the projection, and then the mind then reacting to that projection and creating more imprints to project. Right.
And
so
is
so
that,
let me just finish. I got to.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
1 second. So the mind-only school says that there's no external phenomenon, that this mind is projecting it.
Yes.
The consequent school, and what Tsongkhapa says is the intent of the conqueror, is to be able to see how things externally do exist.
Yes.
While being empty.
I see. Yeah. So that's it. Right.
So Tsongkhapa is saying that when we're just walking down the street, all of this stuff is around us. It's when we hone in on things and grasp at them, find them attractive, find them as some we hate, and then we grab that, all that starts.
Yes.
It's our misapprehension of them, but it's not saying they don't exist. But if we were to turn to any of the other phenomena that we're not, looking at, and then hone in on that, we would grasp at it as being inherently existent.
I see. Okay. Yes.
But it only exists, according to Tsongkhapa, because it's empty. Why? Because it dependently originates. If it didn't dependently originate, it couldn't exist, according to Tsongkhapa.
Right.
And because it dependently originates, it's empty. And because of dependent originates, there is external phenomena that exists at a conventional level. It just doesn't inherently exist either conventionally or ultimately. So that's the distinction in kind of a, like a smaller version. I know it's 11:42 and a lot of people have to get off, and I don't ever want to share content, right? When people have to leave, they get off and then they don't hear something really awesome. Unless we designed a class where for 30 minutes, we're going to talk about something, afterwards, and those who want to participate in the discussion can. And we're going to formulate things like that in the future. And the last thing is, I want you to make that dedication, whatever it is, maybe like a minute speaking, maybe a minute, we'll just pray to ourselves quietly, meditate on that intention and all sentient beings and wanting them to be free, or whatever Dan says. And then we'll do the concluding prayers, outer mandala offering and dedication prayers. And then every week we'll have someone else who wishes to finish the class with some sort of aspiration, some sort of intention or prayer for all sentient beings, so that everyone can participate in the happiness of all sentient beings through their words every week. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I just want to invite everyone to bring into their hearts the suffering of sentient beings on this planet. We can remember the suffering of those in Ukraine. We can remember the suffering of those in India and Bangladesh. And we can remember the fact that these are all not merely happenings, but signs of our condition, and that we may all be free of this condition, that we may be free of suffering in general, that we may be free from samsara. So let us have compassion in our hearts for those mother sentient beings who are suffering in this very moment. Thank you all so much.
So we'll do just do the Vajrasattva Mantra in case there are any mistakes or anything that needs to be purified. Om Benza Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sattva Zeno Vajita Dedo Me Baba Sutokaya Me Baba Subokaya Me Baba Anuradu Me Baba Saga Siddhi Me Prayacha Sava Karma Zucha Me Gitanchi Anguru Maha Bhagavan Sava Tata Gata Benza Mame Munko Benza Baba Maha Samaya Sattva Homage. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may quickly reunite with the being that we knew as Kensur Geshe Wandak, who emanated from the Dharmakaya, who was also simultaneously emanating as an enjoyment body, teaching the Arya Bodhisattvas. May this emanation meet with us in all of our lives. May we meet with this emanation when we are ordinary beings, and when we meet with this emanation when we are Arya Bodhisattvas in the Pure Land. May we quickly become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. Thank you so much, everyone. Really, such a blessing to be able to hear this information and understand what the Conqueror's intent is and how we get to that understanding. So thank you, and see you Thursday night at the Bodhicitta class.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that prayer. And
Sure.
Again, we'll every week somebody can just raise their hand maybe at the beginning, or I'll call, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But every week I'd like someone different to do the prayer of intention, maybe at the end before we do the dedication. So thank you.
That'd be
Have
nice.
a wonderful week.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.